And good morning, good evening, whatever end of the spectrum you are on, whether starting your day or ending your day, we're glad you're here with us on Overnight America with John Grayson. My name is Lou Pate, sitting in for John, who's getting some well-deserved R&R, and he'll be back after the July 4th holiday and full of vim and vigor and bringing it to you like he always does. But for tonight, I'm here with you, and we have a lot going on. We're going to bring it to you about the latest on the update in Istanbul and the terrorist attacks and how it pertains to us here at home heading into the July 4th weekend. We're going to have a special guest, Deborah Weiss. Following Deborah Weiss will be Susan Knowles. She's a former practicing attorney, an author, contributor to theblaze.com. We're going to be discussing the week in politics and some things pertaining to the, 2016 presidential election, and give you some different angles on that. Not just the anti-Trump infomercials. Those are kind of getting boring. And a little later on, we're going to lighten things up. We got another Elvis birthday coming up, in about a month and a half. But there's also another book coming out saying that Elvis overdosed on purpose. Corey Cooper will join us. He's an Elvis Presley expert. And also Elvis's first guitarist, Scotty Moore. R.I.P. We'll talk about the death of Elvis's first guitar player. And right here in our own backyard, Route 66, Kip Wilborn, St. Louis's own, is going to talk to us about the efforts to save Route 66. The old 66 bridge might be coming down in January of 2017. We'll talk about all that Route 66 still has to offer and the number of different groups that are involved in trying to save that. So Kip Wilborn will bring us there. And rounding things up, Chris Epting, who is a pop culture extraordinaire, author, activist. He'll be joining us as the Olympics are upon us. August 5th, they begin. We're going to be talking about doping in the Olympics, and he has a new book out that details. You would think it took place in 2016 with the political correctness that was hurled upon 8-time gold medalist Shirley Babashoff, but we'll be talking about that. Lots coming up. Of course, we're going to be taking your phone calls. 866-962-4566. Again, 866-962-4566. We got a bunch of guests coming up tonight, folks, and I want you to know that when I'm on and I have a guest, don't think you can't call. It's kind of like a communal effort, if you will. It's just because I'm talking with someone, they're talking with me, we want to hear from you. You've got a question for the guest, agree or disagree. You got a question for me, agree or disagree, or maybe you want to take the conversation in a different direction. We want to hear from you. Again, it's Overnight America with John Grayson. My name is Lou Pate. Thrilled to be here. Mike Anderson is manning the phones, producing the show, multitasking, making it happen, bringing it to you. 866-962-4566. Now, first out of the gate, we have... we're just going to get a little heavy, but then we're going to loosen up as the night goes on, as I said. We have Deborah Weiss. She's an attorney and an author. She focuses on free speech and terror-related issues. She has served as the assistant corporate counsel under both Rudy Giuliani and Bloomberg administrations in New York, and she was the counsel for the Committee on House Oversight in the Congress. She has authored several books, and she's a regular contributor to Front Page Magazine, and her website, you can check it out, is vigilancenow.org. Deborah Weiss, welcome to Overnight America with John Grayson. How are you?
Hi, Lou. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us in this late hour. We do appreciate your time. We know you told me you got a busy day tomorrow. I couldn't list all of the books that you have written and that you have been a contributing author to because, the show is only 4 hours, Deborah Weiss. We only have so much time. Your accomplishments are too long. So
okay.
I hope I didn't slight you. But all kidding aside, terrorism. Lone wolf terrorism. Now we see the attack in Istanbul in the Ataturk airport, which is one of the most secure, one of the busiest, first of all, then one of the most secure airports in the world. Obviously, earlier this year, there was the Brussels attack. A few weeks ago, Orlando in the nightclub there. And then we had San Bernardino just before Christmas time. The lone wolf thing seems to be taking off. The one today, there was arrests today in reference to the Istanbul attack, Deborah Weiss, threw a curveball to everybody because they're from Russia. They're Chechens. Everybody thought they were going to be Arabs. They're still Muslim. It's kind of an overlap. There is still a connection to ISIS and to the Islamic State. What is going on? Are they coming together? Are they forming a coalition? We know the Boston Marathon bombers a few years ago were from Chechnya, but I think this caught everybody off guard today. What are they saying in your circles about Islamic terrorists from Russia in pertaining to the Istanbul attack?
Well, the relationship of Turkey to ISIS and Islamic radicalism is pretty complicated. So I'll just go over that very briefly. They do have the area from Russia where they came from was really the center of Islamic radicalism over there. And from our point of view, what's relevant about it, I mean, there's all kinds of internal politics, but what's relevant about it is it shows that ISIS is recruiting from all kinds of other foreign countries. So it just shows the strength of their recruiting. And there's a lot of reasons that the attack might have taken place. I mean, first of all, Turkey was a secular country for a lot of years. It's still considered secular, but in the last several years, it's gotten more and more Islamist. It's had a much more Islamist influence.
And I'll say this: you can't say this. We don't want to jeopardize your career. So basically, it's like Europe. It's going down the tubes with the more that Islam takes part is taking over in the country there.
Well, from their point of view, that might not be the case, Lou, because you and I obviously are from America, and a lot of Americans and a lot of Westerners, the way we saw in England with the recent Brexit vote, we have Judeo-Christian values as the basis of our government and our value system, and when you bring in Islamists, then it changes the values.
Well, now, Deborah, hold on. Let me interrupt you there. I apologize for interrupting, but I'm not referring to even a religious standpoint. I'm just saying, like, I have many good friends who are from England and from London area and the suburbs surrounding it, and it's a quality of life thing. You look at the influx of Islam into England, most notably London. And the quality of life there is going down the tubes. You look at areas of Paris, many of the districts there, the Parisian police cannot even patrol because the imams will not let them in. And they're putting down the law there. They're enforcing Sharia law, and the laws of France and the city of Paris don't even apply. The laws of London. We see that there's a Muslim mayor in London who he gave a speech recently, and I don't know if you saw this picture, but he moved the men to the front and he made the women stand in the back.
Yeah.
As if they were inferior. I mean, you talk about turning back the clock. So I'm referring not from a religious standpoint, but more of a quality of life standpoint. But go on, I'm sorry.
I mean, there's a fair amount of support for Islamic radicalism in Turkey, in the army, in the general population, and in the government. So I wouldn't want to live under Sharia law. You wouldn't want to live under Sharia law, but apparently there are people who are. So,
now let me ask you this. This airport, Ataturk Airport, it's a very modern facility, one of the best in the world, one of the busiest in the world, as I mentioned, one of the most secure in the world. Why hit this one? It's not about the influx of Islam into Turkey. I really don't think that I think it's more to hit this facility is sending a message to America and the world. Am I wrong on that?
Well, ISIS and a lot of Islamic terrorist groups tend to have symbolic gestures when they make attacks. For example, in the Middle East, they'll pick the Christian churches, old buildings that have historical significance. Obviously, they want high-value targets in densely populated areas, which this airport certainly was. It's one of the most well-used airports in the world. So if they can kill as many people as they can by targeting a densely populated area, that's helpful. And the other thing is it's done during Ramadan. So you notice that we've already had the Orlando attacks during Ramadan. We've had this attack during Ramadan. And Yeah, that's really all I have to say about
But isn't Ramadan, it's the holiest month? I mean, why do they do this during their quote unquote holiest month? It baffles anybody who's got an ounce of logic and common sense, though.
Well, to them, this is holy war. That's what jihad means. It's holy war. The apologists will say that it's an inner spiritual battle. But if you read the history of Muhammad and the meaning of the Quran, it's very clear that first and foremost, it's a struggle against the infidel. And to them, this isn't terrorism. When we use the word terrorism, which is, for a political purpose, violence to scare people, to disrupt their lives, to achieve a political goal, that's what we call terrorism. But to jihadists, this is jihad, which is a completely different thing from terrorism. In fact, to them, Hamas is not a terrorist organization because they're not legitimate, and the Palestinians have the right of self-determination, according to them. And, in fact, President Erdogan from Turkey actually made the comment that Islamic blasphemy is one of the worst forms of terrorism. So you see, according to his definition, you don't even have to have violence in order to have terrorism, but not all terrorism includes violence. Not all what we consider violent terrorism is terrorism. So their definitions,
Deborah, help me out with this,
are all different.
I'm a regular Joe Main Street, Harley riding, shaggy haired guy. Okay, help me out here. How can you call it what they can call it what they want? They can call it jihad. We call it terrorism. We could disagree on the verbs, but how do they justify blowing up innocent people, many of whom share their faith? I mean, they blow up they blow up marketplaces. They blow up buildings. They're killing other Muslims. They're killing women and children who don't even know what religion is yet, the children anyway. How do they justify the slaughter of innocents?
Well, it's the same thing with the word innocent. What you and I consider innocent might not be what they consider innocent. If we, I think I was a 9/11 survivor from the World Trade Center, and the people who were in there are taxpayers. They're taxpayers to America, which is the great Satan. So we're not innocent. If you live in Israel, you're not innocent. And all the infidels, if you're a Christian and you're a 13-year-old girl, you're not innocent. According to them, all the infidels are not innocent. And Muslims who are not like-minded, who don't agree with their interpretation of Sharia, are also not innocent. So they're really a target.
Hence the whole Sunni and Shia thing, which goes back thousands of years.
Sunni
But hold that
and
thought,
Shia.
Deborah Weiss. We have to take a quick break. You're listening to Overnight America with John Grayson. My name is Lou Pate. If you'd like to take part in the conversation, it's 866-962-4566. Our special guest is Deborah Weiss. She is an author. She is an attorney. She's an expert on all things dealing with radical Islam. The conversation will continue here on Overnight America with John Grayson. Welcome back to Overnight America with John Grayson. Lou Pate sitting in for John. He'll be back next week, but I'm accompanied by Mike Anderson. We're bringing it to you. We're making it happen. Our special guest is Deborah Weiss. She is an attorney, and she is an author. She's an expert on all things that deal with Islamic terrorism and the jihad, and she is staying with us into the night for an extended interview. If you'd like to take part in the conversation, feel free to join at 866-962-4566. Deborah Weiss, I got off on a little bit of a tangent there, but I like that because that means our brain cells are opening up. When people are listening to Overnight America across this great country of ours, it's interesting, the relationship between the Islamic State and people moving to Turkey and so on and so forth. It's all pieces of a big puzzle, but I know as an American, I only care about how this affects me. Okay, when I go to an airport in any city around the nation, is it going to be under siege with Islamic terrorists and gunmen? If I go to a restaurant, is there going to be slaughter? If I go to a dance club, is it going to be dangerous like in Orlando with 49 people died? John Brennan, head of the CIA, the director, said that we can expect an ISIS-type attack like the one in Istanbul, like the one in Brussels, lone wolves like in Orlando, somewhere in the United States. Boy, I tell you what, can't get anything past him. He really went to the top of his class, huh? Of course you could expect it eventually. It's going to happen. It's just a matter of when. That's the unfortunate part of it. We can't predict it. But you have the Obama administration, and you have John Kerry, the Secretary of State, saying that ISIS is on the run. Are they on the run as Obama and Kerry say or not? I mean, what is they saying in your field there?
No, they're not on the run.
Short answer, no.
No, absolutely not. They're on the rise. Obviously, they're on the rise. There's Paris, Brussels, Orlando, as you said, and it's hilarious that he could say that with a straight face. In fact, the chairman of the Homeland Security Committee in the House said that Kerry's comments defied reality. And it's not just Kerry. It's his whole administration that has made comments recently that are completely ludicrous. Obama said, we stand by the people of Turkey and will do what's necessary to make sure that, quote, these kinds of attacks aren't happening. What does that even mean? First of all, they are happening. Obviously, they're happening. Second of all,
with increased frequency.
Increased frequency in the West, and notice the language that he can't call them Islamic terrorist attacks, just these kinds of attacks, whatever kinds of attacks those might be, by violent extremists, right? That's the phrase they use, violent extremists. And when they say that, they don't make any distinction between, I can't honestly even say they don't make a distinction between Islamic terrorists and Tea Party types or other people, because they seem to want to make it about that phrase about everybody except for Islamic terrorists.
Jay Johnson, another embarrassment from the administration, actually said violent right-wing extremists are equally as dangerous as terrorists. That's a paraphrase. But Deborah Weiss, can you stay with us, please?
Sure.
All right, hold on. When I come back, I want to continue to talk about how this affects America, but I also want to talk about what seems to be a media blackout. More coming up here on Overnight America with John Grayson. My name is Lou Pate. Welcome back to Overnight America with John Grayson. Lou Pate in for John. I'll be back next week. And we're talking with Deborah Weiss. She is an attorney, and she deals with free speech and terrorism-related issues. She is the author of The Organization of Islamic Cooperation's Jihad on Free Speech. Again, I flubbed that one. Sorry, Deborah. The Organization of Islamic Cooperation's Jihad on Free Speech, and other books as well. Check out her website at vigilancenow.org. Deborah, thank you for staying with us for this extended time. I've been looking through the papers, preparing to sit in tonight for John Grayson, and the internet allows me to go all around the country in minutes. And whether it's the New York Times or the Washington Post or the St. Louis Dispatch or the Pittsburgh Gazette, even the Daily Mail in London, there is nothing about the Istanbul terrorist attack. It's almost like the media is scrubbing it. Now, you mentioned before we went to the break, for those of John's listeners who were just joining us, that the Obama administration does not want to highlight terrorism. They don't want to acknowledge terrorism. He'll occasionally use the word terrorism. They don't
want to acknowledge its Islamic ideological roots. That's
right.
The main thing they don't want to acknowledge.
Right, and the more they ignore it, the sillier they sound. I mean, you look at Orlando and the massacre there, the terrorist attack. That loser called 911 3 times to pledge his allegiance to ISIS and the state, and also put it on Facebook before the cops finally killed him. And then you've got the president saying, no, there's no link to ISIS. Same thing in Istanbul. I mean, these guys, the only twist here is that they're from Russia. So what is it with the media? I mean, I know a lot of the media organizations out there are puppets for the DNC. They're puppets for the Obama administration. They'll do whatever they want. It only happened 3 days ago, and already it's gone from the headlines, and not much has happened except for the media obsession with Donald Trump. Are they trying to scrub the terrorism? I mean, you don't hear about Orlando anymore. They're still burying people there. Obviously, Istanbul is fresh, but is there a media scrub going on here being dictated by the White House, in your opinion?
Well, I'm not aware of a scrub on the occurrence of the attacks. I mean, I don't know. I'd have to do a search. I found things on there, so I don't know about that. But in terms of the language and in terms of the bias with which it's reported, there's definitely a scrub, if that's how you want to word it. And I think it's for more than one reason. One is a lot of the journalists really don't know much about this subject. They just buy the narrative that they hear from either the left or the White House or what they learn in their indoctrination in journalism school. And the second thing is some of them are they're just believing the Islamic narrative, which is you have organizations that are really Muslim Brotherhood front groups, often have terrorist affiliations, Council on American Islamic Relations, Islamic Society of North America, and these are groups that are holding themselves out as, quote, moderates. They use the right language that we want to hear, and then they start forming coalitions with, quote-unquote, progressives. They have interfaith dialogues to show how they're victims. And I think America just is in a bubble. A lot of people just have no clue what life is like under an Islamic theocracy, for example. I mean, I taught a class and was shocked that these were college students, and when you told them things about what it's like to live in Saudi Arabia, this was news to them. They didn't know that women aren't allowed out of the house without an escort, a male escort, that they can't get medically necessary surgery without permission.
Deborah, historically, if you look back on history, and we have to look back on history because there's the old adage, he who ignores history is doomed to repeat it.
Right.
You look back, after World War I, we had the Roaring '20s, yet there was still a lot of turmoil in Europe. And the 1930s brought the rise of Hitler in 1933, and we had the Great Depression. We had our own problem at that time, but by the time we're coming out of the Depression, it was still hitting us heavy, but we're starting to ease out of it. World War II is raging in Europe, and America is turning a blind eye to concentration camps where Jews and other groups are being slaughtered, focusing on the economics of the situation and the depression. And then you look historically, we've ignored what's going on around the world. We don't teach world history in our classrooms because there's just no interest in it.
We don't teach American history.
Well, not anymore. Well, we teach a revised version of it. That's a story for another day. We could do a whole week of shows on that. But historically, America doesn't pay attention to what is going on around the world. And only in recent years, and probably with the advent of the Internet, do people you can go to the London Times, you can go to the Daily Mail, you can go to Australia in a click of a finger. But our attitudes don't change. Most Americans do not care about foreign affairs, and they don't care about foreign history. They don't care about foreign affairs. It's very strange.
Yeah, well, we just live in a bubble. Everyone's just worried about their daily lives. It's a pretty big country, and they have their work and their school, and they don't realize that what happens over there affects what happens over here, and our foreign policy is very important, and how you label things is very important. I mean, this administration has a history of purging everything. Oh, going back to your other question, I want to mention, not specifically on the Ataturk attack, on the airport attack, but yesterday, Senator Ted Cruz held a hearing on naming the enemy I guess they were calling it radical Islamic terrorism. I don't know if I'd use the word radical.
He was trying to press Jay Johnson.
He was talking to the whole panel. Yeah, he was. Okay, well, I lost my train of thought now. The whole panel, I just wanted to tell you this about CNN, since you asked about the media. I was unable to attend that hearing, and when I went to look at it online, I didn't listen to the whole thing, but there was one speaker who named some of the names of the appointed people by Obama, political appointees in his administration that have either radical ties or sympathies towards Islamic radicalism. He named the names and was talking about the problem with not identifying all of this, and CNN bleeped it out. They bleeped out the names.
Oh, I mean, now you're opening up my brain cells to a whole bunch of things. It brings back the transcript of the Orlando terrorist when they wanted to scrub all of the references to Allah and the Islamic State boggles the mind.
That wasn't the media. That was done by the administration.
That was what's her name?
Attorney
General Lynch.
U.S. Attorney. And even the first time they said, first of all, they blamed it on the families. They don't want to re-injure them or traumatize them, which is just ridiculous because everybody knew what it was. That's how ludicrous it's gotten. I mean, at this point, I think for a lot of years, people didn't know. They were in the dark. They just believed the lines. Islam's a religion of peace, and terrorism has nothing to do with Islam. And, I'm not saying all Muslims, though. I just want to make my disclaimer. I'm not saying all people who call themselves Muslim, but to say that it's not related when they themselves are pounding it into the ground, saying this is why we're doing it, it's ridiculous. Then you'll have the FBI right afterwards, after someone says this is why I'm doing it, you'll have a 3-month investigation to find out why they're doing it, and at the end of the investigation, it'll be inconclusive. We still don't know the reason. In fact, that's what they said about Orlando. We might never know the reason. It's a big mystery.
Now, since you brought up Orlando, and I did too, is there any similarity between how the and I'm not here to pick on Obama. That's just too easy.
Why not?
It's just too easy. It's just too easy. He's an embarrassment at this point. But is there a similarity between how the Obama administration is responding to Istanbul, obviously a foreign country in Turkey, and Orlando right here in our own backyard?
Well, the similarity is, number one, denials of its relationship to the Islamic ideology. Denial. Deny. Islam is one of the great religions, and this is just a twisted whatever, and it really doesn't have anything to do with it. And that's why he keeps repeatedly calling it something else. With Orlando, it was everything except an Islamic terrorist attack. It was a hate crime. It was, whatever. And now with this attack, it's the same thing. He's mentioning these kinds of attacks. That's what it is. These kinds of attacks. It has no label. It has no reason. Then you have John Kerry saying things like the ISIS recruiters are really doing a very good job. So what we have to do...
A commendation from the Secretary of State, Deborah.
Pardon?
A commendation from the Secretary of State.
He's saying that we have to... He's saying that we have to invest in education and entrepreneurship so that they have an alternative to terrorism. This shows absolutely no understanding of why people are doing this. You remember the State Department a long time ago said they need jobs. Oh, Loretta Lynch, after Orlando, actually said that love is the most effective counterterrorism strategy we have today. I couldn't believe it.
I remember that from, earlier in the week.
Just all hold hands. That's what the problem is. So they're coming after you. You're blindfolded with your hands tied behind your back, and they're wielding an axe because they're going to chop off your head, and all they need is love. I have newsflash, Loretta Lynch. Love is not a counterterrorism strategy, and neither are the jobs, and neither is what they're doing in the countering violent extremism programs, which is what they're pouring money into. I mean, I hate to say it, but even some of the Republicans, Mike McCall, who's not really terrible on these issues, but he's not great either, his response to Orlando was to pour more money into these programs. Yet, it is these programs that are part of the problem.
Well, we've learned from LBJ's War on Poverty that you can throw however many trillions of dollars at a problem, and it's not going to fix it. But let me ask you this, Deborah.
Depends what the program is, not if it's a program that obfuscates what the problem is. It's imperative to have a proper diagnosis if you're going to have a proper cure.
Deborah, just a quick synopsis here on before we go to break. They want to hit us here, okay? They're happy for the lone wolves, but they would love a Brussels-style, Istanbul-style attack here. Why hasn't it happened here yet? I hope it never does, but why hasn't it happened? They just can't get it together here? I mean, I know it's only a matter of time, but why hasn't it happened here in your professional opinion?
In all honesty, Lou, I'm not sure I know what you're talking about because it hasn't. What do you think Orlando was, San Bernardino? I mean, ISIS right now is calling for quote-unquote lone wolves to commit these attacks, so they're ISIS-inspired. It makes no difference whether they're a card-carrying member or whether they were inspired by the directive that was sent out to the world for those who adhere to their belief system. It makes no difference. And it'll continue to happen until we address the ideological cause of the problem. When John Kerry said we have to get to the root cause of, quote, violent extremism, well, guess what? The root cause is the ideology that's not violent extremism. It's religious fervor for Islamic radicalism.
Now, producer Ben is telling me that ISIS militants account for less than 1% of the total world population of Muslims. Now, while that might be true, how much of the terrorism do they account for, in your opinion, Deborah?
That ISIS might count for 1% of what? Of the world's population?
ISIS militants account for less than 1% of the total world population of Muslims.
I don't know what the percent is, but what I can tell, first of all, you're just picking out one group. We also have Al-Qaeda, Al-Nusra, Boko Haram. There's a lot of Islamic terrorist groups. This is just one. And ISIS is the best funded and has the most fighters of any Islamic terrorist group we've seen in quite a long time.
And they know how to get the headlines, too, in the most macabre ways.
And a lot of it came in, Lou, maybe we can talk about this after the break, but a lot of them in Turkey came in through their refugees.
Oh, and just before we go to break, I just want to make a note of a meaning to make this. The terrorists who bombed the Istanbul airport and shot it up, they only came into the country on May 25th from Russia and Chechens and the Dagestan. Deborah Weiss, hold that thought. We'll be right back. You're listening to Overnight America with John Grayson. My name is Lou Pate, sitting in here for John on Overnight America. Back to Overnight America with John Grayson, Lou Pate here with you, Ben James producing the show, pushing the buttons and multitasking, making it happen, taking the reins over from Mike Anderson, who got the show rolling. Our special guest, Deborah Weiss. She's an attorney, specializes in free speech and on terrorism-related issues. She's the author of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation's Jihad on Free Speech. Deborah, we just got a few minutes left, but...
Yeah, can I respond to your comment that your producer made about the numbers?
Sure.
Okay,
Please
so
do.
First of all, he's saying it's 1% of all Muslims. First of all, with 1.7 billion Muslims, 1% is quite high. Second of all, there are other Islamic groups, as I was stating before. Third of all, we're talking about who are actual ISIS members, but then there's material support, the money they give, people who help them find places to stay, help them get visas. There's other ways of supporting them, and that increases the number. And then on top of that, there's the nonviolent, what I'll call nonviolent jihadists, who still have the same goals, like achieving an Islamic caliphate and implementing worldwide Sharia law. And if you include those groups, which are Muslim Brotherhood and their front groups, then the numbers drastically increase.
Well,
so
listen, just for the record, I could leave and you and Ben can take this discussion into the next hour. I might have to be an arbiter or a referee on that, but
I'm not trying to say that all Muslims are terrorists, but the truth is that most of the terrorist problem we're facing today is an Islamic jihadist terrorism. It's a global movement, and what they want is Sharia. All the groups want the same thing. They might be fighting about how to achieve it or who's going to be in power once they get it. But for those who want to deny that there's a global jihad movement, that is the problem. You can see it all around the world. You see it in Turkey. You see it in Europe because they're coming in the refugee programs, and Obama has it scheduled for refugees to come here. We don't have a way to vet them. The government has admitted that. And in Germany, you can see videos of refugees walking around the streets with ISIS flags. So stay tuned, and we'll see if it's coming here. I think you should take that into consideration when you think about what team you want in the White House. We have two not really ideal choices maybe, but when you vote, you're not voting for a person, you vote for a team. Right. Who's on their national security team? What policies are they going to have? Do we want to deny that there's such a thing as Islamic terrorism, or do we want to acknowledge it and try to prevent it?
All right. Hey, Deborah, we got to wrap it up there. But in defense of Ben James, he did say less than 1%. I just wanted to get that out there because I don't want Ben mad at me. I want
right.
I want him to kick me out of the building. But no, Deborah Weiss, excellent information. Do appreciate it. You and Ben will have to agree to disagree. We'll pick this up another day. Once again, Deborah Weiss is our special guest. She is an attorney and she is an author. Her book, The Organization of Islamic Cooperation's Jihad on Free Speech. And check out her site at vigilancenow.org. Deborah Weiss, have a safe and fun 4th of July weekend. Thank you for coming on America Overnight with John Grayson.